Welcome to Return on Life with Whitestone Professionals and Stewardship Matters. I'm your host, Dawn Whitestone with Whitestone Professionals, here today with expert Scott Thomas from Stewardship Matters Incorporated. And Scott's going to talk to us today about return on life. So Scott, what does that mean, return on life? Tell us about it.
Yes. So are you managing your money in a way that improves your life? Is your purpose and the things that are important to you, your priorities, are they connected to your planning? You know, if your money's not improving your life, if it's making you angst, if it's creating problems, that's not good. We want it to be a tool. Money is a tool. And so return on life is something I learned through a group called Kingdom Advisors. And Mitch Anthony is big on this return on life. And he has just inspired a whole group of people around the country to think differently as advisors, to ask different questions. So 3 of the questions that are very popular is, where are you from and what was money like growing up? So for me growing up, money was very tough. I was the youngest of 5, and everything was a hand-me-down. I mean, it was pretty much always hand-me-downs, and I wasn't asking my mom or dad for money. So mom was stay-at-home mom. We didn't have much money. So I got working and got very entrepreneurial at a very young age. In fact, I was mowing 26 lawns in middle school with my best friend, Mike. We
Wow.
loved having our bicycles. We bought nice, beautiful bicycles, stereos, clothes, saved for college, saved. We both bought our own cars. So that was a lot that drove me, was to work harder and be entrepreneurial at a very young age. Had I been handed money, I don't believe that would have been the case. And now, second question is there anything happening in your life right now that has a major impact on your financial future? Well, in 2020, that question is almost emphatically yes for most people. And
Yes.
so what is happening and how is it going to impact? Sometimes we don't know what that impact is, but if we're watching the news a lot, we're going to think the worst and we're going to dream the worst. And we need someone to process that. We need a counselor. We need somebody to have a conversation of what's reality, because we're going to get emotionally charged in it. And then the
That
third,
is so true, Scott. And
yes,
and that's what one of the things I love about what we're doing here together, because with me as a licensed mental health counselor and a coach, and both a personal and a business coach, the numbers aspects of things, people are really worried about their money, and so they need the kind of services that you provide in order to be able to look at the reality of the numbers. And then they also need the kinds of things that I do in order to be able to tone down that anxiety level. And again, we're looking at reality, but it's not always what's happening. Sometimes it's how we're responding to what's happening and the
yes,
meaning that we make of it. And
yes.
so I love that we're doing this together, because we can help people with that return on life and making meaning. And then, okay, how do we take the money that we have and really invest it in our lives, and in doing good for ourselves and others? So
Yeah.
excellent question. I love
And
that.
this third question, I used to ask it years ago when I was first posed this question, and then I stopped doing it for like a really long time. And I just started redoing, like asking this question again in the last couple of years. And I'm going, why did I stop asking this question? Because it's a
Why
great
did you?
question. It's a great question. I don't know why I stopped, but it says, if you already had all the money you ever wanted, what would you do differently?
Mhm.
And that is really telling. And I have to tell you, a lot of times people will say to me when I ask the question, you mean like if I won a lottery and it was $5 million or something, and net of taxes, it's $3 million, and that's like all the money I would ever want? What would I do different? Huh. I'm not sure I'd ever think about that. They usually say, I'd like to travel more, or I would like to do this. I'd probably buy this kind of car. You know, there's some things that they say they want to do, but they don't really think too much about that. And what I found is people who are well grounded at knowing this finish line, knowing like how much is enough, because you can get to a place where you keep moving that line.
Mhm.
And so what happens is we become maybe more self-absorbed and greedy. And
Mhm.
so we should have a line where we pray about that, we think about that, we process and say, how much do I really need?
Yes.
And then not only what you need, but then things that can be planned above that that are nice, and plan for those and have somebody help you process that. But then you get to a point where you go, I really want to do this. Now, I love what Ron Blue also says about money. He says all money decisions are really spiritual decisions, because it's
Mhm.
how we work out our belief system, our priorities, our goals, and all of that gets worked out with money. So money is not only a tool, but it's also a test. Okay?
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
and not just the dreaming about the future, but even in the here and now.
Yeah.
Sometimes in business, we look at our bank account and we're running out, and we look at our accounts receivable and we say, I need to go get, I need to get after these clients. And sometimes I stop and I ask myself, if I weren't in trouble financially, how would I be doing this? And I try to, even when things are tight, I try to treat people the way I would as if I had all the money that I need. And it makes such a difference in my attitude and how I feel about the work that I do, and in also how people respond. And so that's a really key question. Yes, for the future, but also for right here and now and how we behave. So those
Yeah.
are great questions, Scott. Thanks for sharing those with us.
Yeah, and so there's something I want to point out next that's really important as part of the happiness factor.
Oh
And
yeah.
that is, stop comparing yourself to others.
Uh-huh.
Because comparing breeds discontentment. And so you see a picture. I've actually seen this big, it's a dark blue ship. I've actually seen that in Fort Lauderdale. I was staying in a
Mhm.
hotel on the water, and it was parked at the hotel where I was staying.
Did you
Um,
take this picture?
I did not take this picture. I actually found it on Google, but I have seen this particular ship. But this little boat right here, these people are probably out enjoying this nice little venture, and they're seeing the sunset, and all this stuff is great. And then they come around the corner of the bay, and then this big ship is just sitting there, and they're going, wow, imagine that. Wow. And now they start comparing themselves. And people do that with cars. They do it with their jobs. They do it with their spouses. They do it with all kinds of things. So it could be tangible things or intangible things.
Mhm.
So think about, are you managing your money in a way that improves your life? Are you comparing? Are you envious and not discontented? So be happy with where you are, but don't be complacent. Keep working and driving towards goals. Working towards those things is a very positive.
Mhm.
So we want to personalize goals and the plans. How do the goals and the plans meet?
Oh, that's a
And
great
and so
question.
when people are telling me I'd like to retire early at 55, I don't want to wait till I'm 65 or 70 to retire. I want to retire at 55 and say, well, what do you want to do at 55? So we
Mhm.
take a blank calendar and we say, here's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then we
Uh-huh.
have, 7 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock at night. What are you going to do to fill that calendar? I actually have a picture of this. I have a
Uh-huh.
copy of it, and I stick it in front of people when they tell me this. I said, so tell me, how are you going to fill this calendar? And they go, well, that's a good question. I hadn't really thought about it too much, but I know I want to play more golf.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, how much golf do you want to play?
When?
When?
Yes.
How is that going to work?
Is
And
that
look,
every morning or once a
is it
week?
every day for the rest of your life? And so, do you want to just sit on a beach and vegetate? Tell me more about what you want to do, and then I have to find out what makes them happy.
Yeah.
What pleases them. And invariably I get somebody who's a 60-year-old woman who says, I want to spend time with my grandkids.
Yep.
I want to bake cookies with them. I want to read to them. I want more time. I want more of that lap time with my grandkids. And so I get that.
Yeah.
That's a really important piece. And then, let's say she's married. And so the husband now has to figure out, well, how can we make that more possible? Maybe she has to get on plane trips and various things. So he's got to work towards making that happen. Maybe that's a priority for him. Maybe it's not. Maybe he's the one that's funding it. But we've got to talk about logistics of health insurance prior to Medicare age 65. We got to talk about, how are you going to handle, inflation in retirement? So medical inflation runs 5-6%. Regular inflation might
Wow.
be running 1 to 2%, about 2% over the last 30 years. But medical inflation is oftentimes 6%, and in some medical inflation it might be 10%. So that's something that people are faked out about. So having some reality checks by having somebody who can say, let's see, what does that cost? Let's look at your plan. Let's look at your goals, and let's see where that meets. And so that's a big part of how do you get a return on life? Because we have to prioritize. We can't do everything, right?
Right.
Budgets won't allow us to do everything. So we have to choose what are the priorities.
Well, and I love that you're setting up that ideal calendar and saying, okay, you want to retire at 55. What does your week look like? And I mean, we do that with business as well. When do you want to put these things, and how do you prioritize? But you said something that really caught my attention about that. Medical inflation is 5 to 6%. So if someone retires at 55, they don't go on Medicare until 65. So at 5 to 6% over 10 years, I mean, does that compounding come up to 100%, or what is that?
It's like 90% over that 10-year period. Yeah, it's 90%
Right.
increase. So you got a lot of costs that are there.
So if
That's
you're
significant.
paying $1,000 in for your health insurance today, in 10 years you're going to be paying 1,900. Am I doing that math right?
It very well could be. I mean, that's kind of the norm of where things are going with this. Hey, I want to tell you something really important that I look people in the eye and I tell them this: you're more than a number. That
Yes.
pile of money that you keep saying, I need this pile of money, I need this number, you're more than that. And so if you can connect their purpose of the grandchildren, or, hey, I want to be doing art, I want to volunteer, I want to go on mission trips, I want to do these types of things, the more we can connect that, guess what? We're going to have more buy-in from you.
Right.
If you give me more personalized goals and objectives, I can then start applying wisdom to say, how do we make sure that these things can in fact happen, that they can come together? Make sense?
Yep. Yep.
So
So
there
I'm
are, towards retirement, I love this. This came from The Importance of Being Earnest. JP Morgan puts this in their guide to retirement, and it's control or lack of. And so we have two things that we have no control over, and that's out of our control. And it's this market returns right here and policy. So right now there are policies being made. People are shut down out of their businesses. I can't go to work, things, you got this stay at home thing. All that stuff is out of our control. There's nothing we can do about that. But then there's two
because
things
we're
that we have.
recording this during the coronavirus.
Yes,
And
we are. And
so for
so,
those of you a year from now who are watching this on recording, remember what this was like, because it was not fun.
yeah. And so at any time in history we don't have control over taxation.
Right.
Government implies taxation issues and regulatory issues that we have no control over. It just happens to be more highlighted right now during COVID-19. Two
Yeah.
things we have some control over: our longevity, the food we eat, the exercise, our sleep. How do we take care of ourselves? Some of it's genes, some of it's how we take care of ourselves. So our longevity, we have some control over. Our employment history and our earnings and duration, well, how hard are we going to work? Are we just going to sit back and, it'll take care of itself? Or are we going to lean into it and drive and work, and how long you're going to work? And I'm finding more and more people that want to actually work beyond age 62 or 65. I find a lot of people that find pleasure in that. I have a gentleman that I work with. He's 79 years old, and he loves what he does. He's busy and active every day. I've got another guy who's 85 years old and he works every day. He's a consultant and works in the construction industry, and he's still a very valuable resource at 85 years of age.
Mhm.
That's a wonderful thing. So then
There's a lot of wisdom. That's 85 years of wisdom. And
he knows,
probably,
he's seen it all.
yeah,
He's absolutely
50
seen
of
it
that
all.
is in construction. And that's something, Scott, that I think is so important, that as we get older, we need to understand the amount of wisdom that we have and that we become experts. And so our earning power comes more from our expertise than from our energy level. And I want to encourage people to utilize that and take advantage of that, because you can increase your earnings power as an expert in your industry if you're savvy and wise about that. So yes, so thanks for mentioning that, Scott.
So something you have total control over, or at least
Mhm.
you, in theory, you do. Sometimes you don't feel like it, but you're saving and spending. You have control over that. You're making choices and priorities, and you know, you may not be in the same house you're in. You may have to move out and do things and make choices, but you do have control over this. Asset allocation and the location of what are the types of assets. Do you put it in a Roth? Do you put it in an IRA? Do you put it in a taxable account? Do you tax defer it? Do you have it in a joint registration? Are you trying to shift monies to children, or do something for your parents? There's lots and lots of decisions, and you have control over that. And that's a lot of times what people come to me for, is that's one aspect of 6 things that I provide for them. Asset allocation, money management, that issues. So
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
So are these some of the questions that you ask in order to help determine what that asset allocation is going to be?
Yeah, this is kind of the bigger picture planning. And I ask people, what's in your hand? We need to take an inventory. So we take an inventory of what do you have right now? What can be better utilized, better or discarded? I had a gentleman had a greenhouse, and he had a greenhouse, but he also had a beautiful piece of property, and it was just a gorgeous piece of property that came down from his house. And he said, I'm thinking about putting in a little pond out there, and I want to make a little pitching thing so I can go around the little pond and drop those floating golf balls out there, and then get my little boat and then go gather up the golf balls. And so he's saying he wants to do this. And I said, well, I thought you told me this land was real fertile, that it was good soil. And you also have a well that's a deep well that works great, that's right next door with your greenhouse, right? And he said, yeah. He said, what's your point? And I said, well, you have something in your hand right now that's valuable. But it's valuable, but you got to do something about it. And he said, well, what do you have in mind? I said, well, why don't you plant something and let it grow? And what would be lower maintenance? What would be something that wouldn't take a lot of labor cost? And he said, ornamental trees. And I said, great. Well, how much does it cost for an ornamental tree? He says, for a 3-gallon bucket, about $3. For the material to go into the ground, about $3 each. And so just a few years later, he planted almost 2,000 of them. And
Wow.
the market rate was $300. So it's 100-fold return on that. But that was something he was just going to knock around and hit golf balls, but yet now it provides an income stream. Not only did he sell those off, but he's redone that. So he's doing it all again, and he'll do it again and again and again, because it's good money. And he has something in his hand that he wasn't really seeing. What do I have in my hand? There are people who have
Scott, that just, so, like most people, I think when most people think of financial planners, they think of the market, the stock market. This person's going to tell me which mutual funds to use. You were actually looking at his real estate and saying, how can you get a return on the real estate that you have? So you're looking at this in a very different way than I think most people think of financial planners. Is that the way most financial planners work, or is this unique to you?
I would say that the industry, financial services industry, will promote financial planning. Let us help you with your plan. But the reality is that they're either positioning for mutual funds or money management, assets under management, or it's an insurance sale or some kind of a risk product. And let me show you, if you put money into these products, here's what your numbers are going to look like. They're not really taking the steps to go through the extra education. They're not, the CFP, for example, Certified Financial Planner, that's one step. That's kind of like an AA degree. It's kind of like you gotten some basis of taxation, estate planning, asset allocation, investments. You're getting some base knowledge, but then above that base knowledge, you need a lot more digging into what is possible and having people ask questions and having an open format where it's like, when you have an open format dialogue or discovery, and it's not all about, well, where are your investments? Oh, what's the risk? Oh, we can do better than that. That's a different conversation. In financial planning, we're trying to say, what do you have? Where do you want to go? What are some things that you can see? Like what's happening in the second question, what's happening now and what can you see coming that's going to impact you? Well, my daughter may be moving back home with us because she's going through a divorce. Or my son, has an illness and we may need to take care of him. Or we're having an issue with one of my siblings that we may need to take in a family member, and there's some things, and there's a lot of this stuff that goes on. And so there could be positive impacts and negative impacts. And sometimes it's a positive thing where I've had someone say, well, I need to now take care of my mom. Well, they're taking care of mom, but they were retired. They didn't have hardly enough income, but with mom's Social Security, living with the child, it actually improved both of them because they were living in separate houses and they combined the households, and utilities were cut in half, and now things were actually working much better.
So Scott, as I hear you talking about these things, one of the things I'm thinking is, you're not making any money asking these questions. I mean, financial planners tend to make money off of assets under management. So that speaks to me because I realized that by asking these questions, like even helping the gentleman with the tree farm, start a tree farm, you didn't make any money from that. So why do you do that?
People refer you, they come back to you for other things. They'll say, hey, you really helped me move things along. You helped me with my child. You helped me with my parents. When those kinds of things happen, you're more referable. They know that you're not out just to go try to get the dollars here. Or if somebody comes to you and they say, listen, my son is managing my little taxable investment. My 401k is held over here at the employer, but I still need some planning. I need to figure out Social Security. My son doesn't know how to do Social Security. My son doesn't know how to do VA benefits, doesn't know how to do these other things. So I have people pay me a fee. It could be a flat fee. It could be an hourly fee. So I do, as a registered investment advisor, I do offer fee planning services. Sometimes people will start off on a fee planning service, and I've helped them in an area, and they go, wow, I'm going to be retiring in 2 years. I'd like to roll my 401k to you. And so I get business that way as well. So here's the last piece right here. It says people in transition, their emotions are the highest. Their wisdom's low because their emotions are so high. And as people move from job to job, when people go through job changes, they've had the death of a spouse or a parent, they've had these transitions. When they're in transition, emotions are really high. It's tough to make a good decision. They need counseling of some type. They need mental health counseling. They need career counseling. They need, investment counseling. They need all kinds of counseling. And it's not just about, let's go get your money working from this bucket to this other bucket and manage the risk, because there's a lot of other questions to ask that are very important here.
And you know what those questions are.
Mhm.
And you understand that people make emotional decisions, and you're absolutely right. Part of our education in mental health counseling is understanding transition, and people tend to act from fear, and they operate out of fear, and that is the worst way to make a decision, is to make a decision from fear.
Yeah.
Because it's all about survival and right now, and it's very difficult to plan. And so helping people walk through the questions and ask those questions that help them to make a plan and to get out of the fear and into a sense of, okay, this too shall pass. How do I, if I weren't in the middle of all of this, how would I be making decisions? And,
Mhm.
and how do I use wisdom rather than fear to make those decisions? So very,
Mhm.
very important to have somebody like you in those times of transition. Do you have any stories about that, about somebody that you helped who was very
Oh yeah, and
emotional?
what I did at first is I used to ask, well, what's happening right now? And people would have this glazed over look. And then I have this sheet over here, and the sheet is transition sheet, and it's like 2 long pages front and back on transition. Here's an example. Here's an example on the family side. Do you have a child moving back in the house? Divorce, medical treatments, elderly parents, custodial care, job or relocation, hours cut or pay cut. Or maybe you have a promotion in your job, getting married, becoming empty nesters, children getting married, or new grandparents. Those are just a little tiny piece of the transition questions related to family. And so
Mhm.
there can be lots of other transition questions of things that are important. And so I put it as a list in front of them and say, so tell me, are any of these things happening? And then is how important is it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being low and 5 being high, mark it. And I'll give it to the husband and wife. And sure enough, I get it back, and we look at it, and it's glaring that something is really important. And
Mhm.
oftentimes they wouldn't have told me that if I hadn't have stuck that little tool in front of them. Make sense?
Yes, yes, those kinds of tools can really help people identify things that are under the surface, that are causing emotion, but they may not be consciously aware of it. So taking that unconscious emotion and helping people to see, oh, what's driving that, can be very, very helpful. So
So
excellent.
let
Good
me
to know
share a
that.
recurring story that's happened several times over the last like 7 years. Because about 7 years ago, I had an epiphany about some benefits and some specialized planning that I went and got education regarding it. And so what I found is I had some clients and prospects, people that I was meeting, that were saying, my wife is stopping work early to take care of her mom or her mom and dad. They live, just down the street, and she's a caregiver for them part-time. And so I started seeing this
Mhm.
reoccurring. And so it's taken money out of my clients' household income. And then what we started seeing is, well, now the parents needed to go into an assisted living. And all of a sudden, the out-of-pocket costs, they're burning through assets, and they're spending significant money. And what I found is this is happening all over America for people 45 to 65, have elderly parents
Yep.
that are dealing with this issue. It's like one of the fastest growing industries, occupations, I should say, is custodial care in the United States.
Yep.
Custodial care is just exponential because you got all these boomers that are now needing care. And
Yep.
so what I found is one of the questions I'll always ask under this specialized training is, were either one of your parents wartime veterans? Oh, yeah. I find a lot of people that are age 70 and higher, 72 and higher, a lot of them have served in the military. Well, guess what? They only have to serve 2 years during the military, 90 days during a wartime period, only 1 day, actually, 90 days of service, not even 2 years, 90 days under the old system, 2 years under the new system, and 1 day during a wartime periods. And they say, well, yeah, my dad was in San Diego as a cook in San Diego during Korea. And I'm going, fantastic. So I now can go get them benefits for mom and dad. It does
That
require
they
some
didn't know
planning.
they had.
They didn't know they could have it. And so
Yeah.
I find money. It's like asset archaeology, income archaeology. I'm like finding something they don't know. In fact, my own family, My parents have been collecting for like 3 years now for VA benefits. It's $27,000+ a year tax free. Now, at
Wow.
Easter and Christmas and family gatherings, I get the high five from my siblings going, Scott, if we didn't get this VA benefit, we'd have to be paying this out of pocket. So this
Mhm.
couple that has the parent who served in San Diego, under that scenario, they'd be paying $2,000 a month. Well, now they have $2,000 a month to do things for their grandkids and for themselves, and they're not actually harming as much the issues that are going on, or they're maintaining more assets
Mhm.
inside of the VA planning. So there's a lot
Mhm.
of things that can be done where people wake up and go, wow, I didn't know that was even possible. I thought, do I have to pay anything for this? No. So I do free education regarding this. I give talks on it. And then we work with a nonprofit group that charges a very small, a few $100s after you collect. So if you're collecting $2,000 a month, they'll ask you a one-time donation. It is a donation. And so we connect people up with that. But there's a lot of planning that needs to ask the right questions up front in order to get to that place. That's just a great example of things that come up when they say, what's happening right now? Oh, I'm dealing with my elderly parents. Oh, really? Let's talk about that. And
So
I've been
what are
able to
some
help
of those
lots of
other
couples.
categories? Like you said, family's just one of those categories, and you have that whole 2-page sheet. What are some of the other categories that people might not think of, where you can do some of this income archaeology to give them that return on life that they're looking for?
Yeah, I'm going to share one at the very end when we talk about tools. And I'm going
Okay.
to share one story that's related to that. Another story would relate to taxation. So
Okay.
in 2007 and 8, a lot of people lost a lot of money that sold out of the market. This one widow comes to me, and she had lost, her losses were $160,000. And so that was inside her taxable account. She had about $500,000 and it dropped to like 360 or 340. And so she lost $160,000. Her advisor put her in variable annuities, same risk level, but put her in variable annuities, high cost, illiquid, paid a big commission up front, and no annuities guarantee that all your income is ordinary income. She couldn't offset that $160,000 loss. So that tax loss, her accountant referred her tax loss, she can't use it up. So the advisor totally messed up the tax planning because she could have had qualified dividends and capital gains and had a cash flow and had it 100% tax free for $160,000 of income over the next several years, 100% tax free, and be liquid. And that was totally negated. And to unravel that, it started a process, but I was able to help her get started unraveling because there was some illiquidity and some issues. But the family had to come along and get educated, and I had to share with them ideas like the VA benefits because this person was actually in the military as well. And so that's just an example of asking different questions and what is happening, what do you have in your hand, and what are you trying to accomplish, and digging a little deeper. Make sense?
Yes, yes. And it's very sobering to think about how the people who are supposed to help us can actually do more harm than good. So,
Can be.
Scott, thank you for doing this education. I see this in the counseling field as well, where the people who are supposed to help can actually mess people up more than they were before. So,
Yep.
thank you for helping people get out of those messes.
So in 3 decades, if somebody just tells me they have a number, oh, Scott, I want to have $1.5 million in my retirement account. And that's all their goal is, but they haven't really talked about their story. What do they want to do with that 1.5 million? Why is that important? Oftentimes they flounder and they go off and they squander. Things happen and they're not connected to the purpose and the reasoning behind it. But when somebody gets really connected to the story and the planning and those things come together, they have a higher conviction. they're going to follow through on that better. They're going to have a better success rate. That's been my experience. I can't say it's always the case because, hey, stuff happens, but it's a higher probability
Yeah.
when you connect that purpose in your story to your goals. Make sense?
Mhm. Absolutely. To your financial goals. Yes.
So
Mhm.
what are some possibilities? So you might have something that you could rent out, that you could sell, that you could, I've had people who have had collectibles and they go, well, this was my sister's collectibles, or this was something I used to like, but now they could go on eBay or someplace and sell those items and go create some opportunities. And so what are those possibilities? Name them. And then what kind of challenges would it be to undo that or to change that out? I'm always inspired by, I watch that American Pickers show, and these guys are digging through junk, and they travel around in a van. And so Mike and Frank are digging through stuff, but they know the value of stuff. And then
Yeah.
they buy it and then they sell it, and they do pretty well at this. But for these people that have all the junk, they can't see even what they have. They're not
Right.
uncovering it, and they don't know what somebody be willing to pay for it. And it takes somebody like a Mike and Frank to show up to their doorstep, dig through their barn, and find articles where they're paying them hundreds or thousands of dollars for what that might be a possibility. And so,
Sometimes even just metal. Copper is worth a lot right now, and you can get money from metal. And if people don't know that, they might just junk it.
yeah,
So, and plus it recycles it, so it's better for the planet too.
Yeah, and so I'll ask people about their skill set and their past a little bit. Tell me a little bit about your past. And so um, one person yesterday I was on the phone with, and she's in the hospitality industry, and that's been shut down. And the
Mhm.
likelihood and how it opens back up is going to be really tough. But she
Yeah.
has some other skill sets. And I said, tell me about those skill sets, and what would it be to overcome a challenge to use some of those skill sets and go make some money on it. And she
Do you
goes,
have any?
well,
Mhm.
she knows that she could make some money on it, but she didn't have somebody to ask her that. So
Yeah.
by asking her that, I opened the door and the possibilities. And now we had a great conversation. She's actually coming in to see me, and we're going to talk some more about small steps towards progress to make some money. And who knows, this could be how she's helping people and gives her more purpose, because she's been feeling unpurposeful with all the
Mhm.
shutdown that's occurred over the last several weeks. So that's an example of possibilities. You meet people all the time, and don't you ask them, well, what do you have and what are your possibilities?
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes we need to unearth those things that have been languishing because we haven't had time for them. So what do you enjoy doing? I heard a story yesterday from one of my clients. She has her receptionist loves to make cards. Well, people need to be connected in this. And so my client, who's the business owner, actually commissioned her receptionist to make a bunch of cards, and they sent out 250 cards just to say, hey, thinking of
Nice.
you. And that's a hobby for this person, but now she was able to make some money on it. So
Yep.
things like that. What are your hobbies? What do you love to do? And what are you good at that other
Yes.
people go, wow, I wish I could do that? The
Yes.
company emails was started by somebody who loved to do meal planning, and she just started sharing her meal plans, and that turned into millions of dollars because it's something that a lot of people hate to do. So
Yep.
do you have any other stories of people that you've helped by looking at these possibilities?
I can't think of them off the top of my head right at this moment. It all gets jumbled together, but
Yes.
there's been a lot, a whole bunch through the years. And sometimes it's really small, where, it's just like a hobby, like what you're saying. And sometimes it's a big thing.
Well, Scott, what we're doing right here is actually an example of that. I'm not normally an interviewer. I'm a counselor, but you came to me and said, Dawn, you
Mhm.
ask really good follow-up questions. Could you do this? And I hadn't been thinking of that. So get together with
Might
your
open a new
friend.
door for you.
You did. You opened a door for me as well. So thank you for doing that, because you know how to look at the possibilities. So great questions. So you're a wisdom merchant, aren't you, Scott? And what does that mean to be a wisdom merchant?
Well, there's a lot of paths that you can take moving
Uh-huh.
forward. You hear about Robert Frost and the road less traveled. Maybe that's the best path. Hearing where you're coming from, knowing what you have, taking an inventory of what you have, knowing where you have told me your desires, your passion, what is important to you, will help determine what is that path. I'll give you an example. Um, Oftentimes I'll find people getting wrong information about Social Security. And
Mm.
it's kind of strange that somebody will say, well, I'm retiring, and so I want to collect on my Social Security. That's just a normal response. Well, I'm 65, I'm retiring at 65, and I'm going to start collecting my Social Security. Well, if you're married or you're divorced or you're widowed, there's a lot of other choices. There's 9 ways to claim Social Security, 2,800 rules, and
Whoa,
a
whoa, 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 whoa.
whole bunch of calculations. There's like
Nine
30 different
ways.
strategies for Social Security. It's not just one way to claim. And so there could be a disability claim. There could be the beneficiary of a disability claim. There can be a solo claim. There can be a spousal claim. There can be a widower claim. There's lots of ways that people could be claiming. And sometimes they might be claiming under one method, changing to another and changing to another. So you might have 3 or 4 different types of Social Security claims over a lifetime. So it can change a lot. So wisdom would say, I need to know how those rules fit together. How does this stuff work? And so if you're a married couple, for example, and let's say that you go, okay, well, one of us is retiring and the income's going to drop in half roughly. Okay,
Mhm.
husband and wife, and one of them's retiring and they're 65. And they say, well, I'm going to start drawing on mine. Okay. And they say, I'm going to start drawing on mine. Well, let's say that their benefit was $1,500 a month. Okay.
Mhm.
And theirs was 1,500, but their spouse was only 1,100. And they start collecting at 65, the $1,500 a month. Okay. And the one that has the 1,100 is still working and they wait a little longer. Well, that sounds like, well, the income dropped significantly. Maybe that's the best thing because the one who retired takes their income. But I tell you, when you're married, you want to maximize the higher of the two. You'd be better off trying to figure out how to take the lower Social Security and grow the higher because they're growing at 8% plus inflation. That's basically
Oh,
about 10% a year. So that 1,500 number over the next 4 years, that's going to grow by 40%. That's significant. If you could
wow.
grow another $600, you're going to now be at 2,100. By the way, that's tax advantaged income. That
Mhm.
has more to carry you. By the way, when you die, the higher of the two stays. So by maximizing the higher, it actually is wiser. And people don't know
Yeah.
this. In fact, I went to a meeting in 2012, and it was a bunch of financial advisors there. It was about 100 people, and we've had about 15 of us at the coffee break. And we're talking, saying, hey, what are you doing in your business? And I said, one of the best things I'm doing is Social Security planning. I'm doing seminars, I'm doing workshops, and I'm doing all kinds of things to, utilize this important information. And they all laughed at me. One guy didn't laugh and he grabbed me. He kind of was quiet and he pulled me to the side. He says, I want to learn more about this. And he started learning about it and it significantly impacted his practice and grown. Guess what? I saw this same group of people that had laughed about this in 2012 and I saw them in 2019 and all of them are now doing it. They're all
Mhm.
now doing the planning, but they weren't doing it at the time because they didn't think it was important because the industry wasn't pushing it. The
Right.
financial services industry didn't say that this was important. But I actually have reasons and I had promptings that have led me to doing VA benefits and Social Security benefits and charitable benefits. And the way that I work, I'm usually asked a question, and the question would say, Scott, what do you know about blank? And I don't know, but you know what? I'm a
You're
curious
gonna find
person, and
out.
I have a desire to learn. And so I lean into it and I ask questions, and I know where to ask really good questions. And people I've gathered through the long period of time where I know where to go and ask important questions. And so I've been able to bring a lot of wisdom as a merchant, as a purveyor of wisdom to people. In addition to that, I've also looked at timeless principles from, even like looking back at King Solomon and saying,
Mhm.
well, what does King Solomon have to say about wisdom? He wrote a whole book called Proverbs. And so being able to relay that to people, it's really powerful when they can see that timeless wisdom brought to the table.
There is wisdom in many counselors, and you know how to get where to go to get that counsel. So it's we need to surround ourselves with people like you, and with the financial wisdom, we need you. So thank
And,
you for
and
being
in a
the person
time
that
of
we need.
transition, wisdom is in a scarcity because emotions force out wisdom. And I've
Yep.
done that too. I've gone through transition, and I needed outside counsel and wisdom spoken into my life where I've made some not so wise choices, and I've experienced that. And I sure don't want other people to go through that. So I welcome
Yes.
people, and even invite them to, let's have a conversation. It doesn't cost you anything to have a conversation with me. Pick up
Right.
the phone, call me, email me, let's get together, let's talk about it. Okay.
Well, and talk to you. Yes, when we're in the transition, we need that. But we can also anticipate transition. One of those proverbs from Solomon is the wise man sees trouble coming and hides himself and makes a plan for that. And so you can help people whether they're in that transition or by anticipating what those transitions are going to be, and making a plan for those ahead of time. And then we don't have to live in that fear because we already have the plan. So you've got some tools. What are some tools you have both for people in transition and the people who are making a plan for that transition?
Yeah, great. So I say it a little bit different than what you say, but it's the same idea. I say it's better to prepare than to repair.
Oh,
Let me
yes.
say that again. It's better to prepare rather than repair. And
Mhm.
so my experience has been is that because of emotions, because of lack of insights, because of counselors that are very, very limited in scope, they're not asking the right questions, they don't have the wisdom, they're not seeking wisdom and trying to purvey that to you. Um, there are lots of tools that could be done. And sometimes it's books, sometimes it's movies, sometimes it's worksheets that I have. I have lots of different kinds of tools. I have tools that look at Social Security, for example. The first time was one of my long-term clients came in 2009, and he was holding a Forbes magazine. He said, this magazine talked about something called a switch strategy with Social Security. Do you know anything about that? And I said, no, I don't, but I know exactly where to go. In fact, a good friend of mine has developed wisdom software for Social Security timing, and we were just
Ooh.
talking on the phone yesterday. So it's wonderful that you're coming to me. Sure enough, I get on the phone, I called my friend, and we were able to improve this guy's benefit by more than $250,000. $250,000 present day value improvement. And the way that we
Wow.
were able to do that is we could do something called a file and suspend at that time. And then we could
Mhm.
also collect on a small benefit, but then collect on a bigger benefit later. So essentially, one spouse was collecting on the other spouse, okay? And both of them were growing their benefits by about 10% a year.
Mhm.
And over the time frame, and then they maxed out at age 70, and they actually have gone all the way through this. And they've thanked me several times for
I bet.
being the person that brought that additional dollars to them. Because if that hadn't happened, it would have been a very different looking situation. And tax wise, there's special tax provisions for how Social Security gets treated. In fact, I've got a couple of engineers came in and they were max earners. This was about 3 years ago, and we were doing a tax review, and they both had about 3,000, almost it was $30,000 a year each from Social Security, $2,500 a month and change. And so they had $60,000 of Social Security income. Now with their write-offs, standard deduction and write-offs, with their write-offs, they had almost $30,000, $29,000 of pension income, IRA income, and they paid zero tax. They were in a zero tax bracket.
How did
Zero.
you do that?
Well, it's a whole nother conversation about tax planning, but that's pretty powerful. It's because of the nature of how Social Security gets taxed. You half it, so the 60,000 becomes 30. Then they had 29,000 of income on top of that, so they really had 59,000 of income. But then with their write-offs, it pushed them back down to where they were in a zero tax bracket. And so that's
Nice.
not unusual that I'll find people who they might be earning $150,000, $160,000 a year, but if they have a really large Social Security base and they can pump that up for husband, wife, they might be earning 90 to 105,000 and almost as good as when they were at 160. And one reason why is that usually when you're at like 160, you're saving money into a retirement plan. And so you've got some dollars that are pulled out for that. It might be $20,000. So you might be at 140 that's fully taxable, FUTA, FICA, SUTA, ordinary income versus capital gains treatment. We might have a 5% tax bracket versus a 25% tax bracket. Big difference. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Excellent. So what I've learned today is that, Scott, we all need to talk to you, because there's no way I could absorb all of this and be able to do anything with it. But the questions to ask, where to look for the answers if you don't already have the answers, and you can help us do what we need to do in order to be able to have that peace of mind and get that return on life that you talked about earlier. So
some other practical types of questions that people come in and they'll say, well, I need to buy a car, or I might be leasing a car. Well, let's look at the numbers. Let me look at the lease versus buy. Let's look at the type of vehicle. Let's look at, generally speaking, I prefer for people to buy a car that is higher quality than sometimes what they're thinking, and buy something that's 2, 3, 4 years old that's been well maintained and in excellent condition, because it's already depreciated. And if you have a lot of options and you're the kind of person that go, I want sunroof and heated seats and all this kind of stuff, and you buy a new car like that, you'll see an $80,000 car depreciated to $20,000 in a matter of 4 or 5 years. And yet if you bought that car for $20,000, well, now you've got all those options. If it was super well maintained, you might just go get a warranty plan to help out with that. And you look at the payments on that versus trying to have something that's, quote, new, it's pretty dramatic. You look at when somebody buys a house, you have to think about the full cost of ownership. What's the property tax? What's the maintenance? What the utilities? Water, power, roof, the maintenance issues, homeowners associations. You got to bring all that stuff to the table. And sometimes when you're in the emotion of it, oh, I just love those shutters, I just love that pool, I love that, and they get excited about the house, and then they have a little difficulty being honest with themselves about what are really going to be the expenses. What are those property taxes really going to be? This person who was in there, they were only paying $2,000 for property tax because they were grandfathered into a low tax system. When you buy it, all of a sudden you're going to be paying $8,000. And so you can't go on what their property tax was. You need to find out, well, what does it really cost? Well, what does the insurance cost? Oh, you have a dog. Oh, you have children. Oh, you have a pool. Oh, and there's things that go on where all of a sudden, the markets shrink and maybe the cost of insurance costs twice as much because they didn't have children and didn't have a dog. There's things that need to be addressed. Looking at the total cost on a car's ownership, fuel cost, insurance cost, maintenance, repairs. There's so many things about what's the cost of ownership. It's a good idea to have a conversation with someone else. I call my brother, who's a CPA, and I'll say, hey, I need some help. I need to process this through. Let me bounce some things off of you. And it's always helpful to hear an outside person ask another question or, say, I'm not following your math on that, because I get emotionally attached to something.
Yep. And so even you, just like counselors need counselors, financial planners need to seek out other financial planners. So, or at least
so at the beginning of this conversation, you said, well, I thought, this financial planning, okay, but there's really 6 things that I do. I help people with asset allocation, money management. I help them with behavioral coaching. Hey, let's not make that decision. Let's not bail out of the market at this time. Give them behavioral coaching. I help them with accountability. Okay, so we've developed a plan. You say this is important, and now you're trying to change that plan. Let me hold you accountable. So after the first of the year, every year you see all those commercials about weight loss, and you have all these people that were, selling you on weight loss. And so because we don't learn and we need accountability. And so accountability long-term is important. Financial planning. So the tools of the financial planning, we talked about that. But then there's also the quarterbacking. So estate planning, taxation, investments, risk, insurance, strategies. There's a lot of moving interactive parts here. And quarterbacking that and bringing that together is really important to understand, how does this stuff fit together? And then lastly is service. Oh, you changed addresses, you need to change beneficiaries, you need some help getting this, moved around. You're trying to, get that previous employer's plan and get it rolled over. How do you do it? And they're giving you pushback. That's service issues. So there's really 6 major things that I help people with. And that's just part of the tools.
Excellent. So, Scott, how can people get a hold of you? Can you let them know what your phone number is, your address, your email address?
Yeah. So my phone number is 407-644-9411. That's 407-644-9411. You can also find me at stewardshipmatters.net, Scott at stewardshipmatters.net. The website is stewardshipmatters.net. And remember, money, the way you manage that's important. And it should be improving your life, not making it painful. So money's a tool, it's a test, but guess what? It's also a testimony. It says something about you to those in your community, to your family, and even a testimony to yourself. Hey, I did this and I worked through this. I was able to get these things done. So if you'd like to reach out to me, I'd love to talk with you. Again, 407-644-9411. Thank you, Dawn.
All right. Thank
and
you.
how
Scott.
do people reach you, Dawn? Why don't you put your telephone number up as well?
Awesome. Well, my phone number, you can reach me at dawn@whitestonepros.com, which you see there on my screen. And at whitestonepros.com is our website. Our phone number is 407-605-2720. Again, that's 407-605-2720. And we'd love to hear